The obese girl was mute from trauma until the mountain man taught her to speak through music. The autumn of 1824 settled over the Tennessee wilderness like a threadbare quilt, patchy, inadequate, and offering little comfort. Lily Hutchins stood at the window of her aunt's cabin, her reflection distorted in the warped glass. At 21, she carried more than just the extra weight that made the townspeople whisper. She carried 9 years of silence, heavy as stones in her pockets. The cabin smelled of lye soap and resentment. Her Aunt Martha moved through the cramped space with sharp, efficient movements, each gesture a reminder that Lily was a burden she hadn't asked for. The woman's thin lips pressed together whenever she looked at her niece, as if holding back words that would cut deeper than any blade. "Useless," Martha muttered, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary force. "Can't speak, can't work proper jobs, can't even help me sell at market without frightening customers with that vacant stare." Lily's fingers tightened on the windowsill. The words didn't hurt anymore. She'd grown a thick skin over the years, layer upon layer, inside and out. But the memory behind her silence still burned like coals in her chest. She was 12 when the fire came. 12 when she watched the cabin door barred from the outside by accident or malice. She'd never know which trap her parents inside. 12 when their screams became part of the wind that howled through her dreams every night. The town of Harrisville had grown around her silence. People stepped aside when she walked the muddy streets, not out of respect, but discomfort. Fat, mute, and strange, the trifecta that made her invisible except when she was being mocked. The Yancey boys, particularly cruel, would make exaggerated hand gestures when they saw her, mouths agape in mock stupidity. Their mother never corrected them. Winter was coming, and with it, Martha's patience wore thinner. "I've spoken to Reverend Phillips," her aunt announced one evening, not looking at Lily. "There's a widow in Nashville needs help with laundry. Room and board, no wages. You'll go in the spring." Lily's chest constricted, sent away like unwanted furniture. But what could she say? Her voice had died in that fire, consumed by smoke and horror, and no amount of willing could resurrect it. The next morning, Lily wandered into town earlier than usual, desperate to escape the cabin's suffocating walls. Harrisville was barely more than a collection of rough-hewn buildings clustered along a muddy thoroughfare. The general store, the church, the blacksmith's forge, each as familiar and unwelcoming as her aunt's disapproval. But there was something new. A small building at the edge of town, previously abandoned, now had smoke curling from its chimney. A weathered sign hung above the door, "Dalton's Repairs Instruments and Sundries." Lily had passed by yesterday, but today the door stood open. From inside came a sound that stopped her in her tracks, the clear, pure tone of a piano being tuned. The note hung in the cold air like a question mark. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could object. She stood in the doorway, eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The shop was cramped and cluttered with violins hanging from rafters, drums stacked in corners, and a battered upright piano against the far wall. And beside the piano stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves. Ezra Dalton was 60, if he was a day, with a beard gone more silver than brown and hands scarred from decades of hard living. He'd spent 30 years in the wilderness as a trapper, another 10 as a scout, and the last 5 trying to forget why he'd run from civilization in the first place. His wife, Catherine, had been a piano teacher in Philadelphia. When cholera took her, He'd taken to the mountains like a wounded animal seeking a den. But the mountains couldn't heal what ailed him. He'd returned to the edges of society, bringing with him Catherine's piano, the only thing he'd kept from their life together, and opened this shop. It was his way of keeping her alive, of touching something she'd loved. He looked up and saw the large girl in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the piano with an intensity that startled him. Most people glanced at instruments the way they'd glance at paintings, appreciative but distant. This girl looked at the piano like a dying woman looks at water. "Come in if you're coming," Ezra said, his voice rough from disuse. "Door's letting in the cold." Lily hesitated, then stepped inside. The shop smelled of wood varnish and old leather, of rosin and dust. She moved slowly, carefully, afraid her bulk would knock something over. The Yancey boys had once locked her in the church basement, laughing as they stacked hymnals on the door. "Bet she could eat her way through the wall," one had jeered. "You play?" Ezra asked, though he could see she was too nervous to be a musician. He turned back to the piano, striking the middle C repeatedly, listening for the perfect pitch. Lily shook her head, then realized he wasn't looking. She stood there, useless and mute, hands clasped in front of her. Ezra finished his adjustment and stood back. "Well, she's tuned now. Shame to let her sit silent." He gestured to the bench. "Go on. Everyone should touch a piano at least once." Lily's eyes widened. She pointed to herself, questioning. "Yes, you. Piano won't bite. Can't promise the same for me if you break something, but the piano's friendly enough." She approached as if the instrument were made of glass and dreams. Her work-roughened hands hovered over the keys, trembling. She'd never been invited to try anything beautiful before. The world had made it clear that beauty was not for girls like her. She pressed down on a single-key middle C, the note Ezra had just perfected. The sound filled the small shop, pure and resonant, and something inside Lily's chest cracked open. A sob came without warning, tearing from her throat in a sound that wasn't words, but was more honest than words could ever be. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed the key again and again, each strike a declaration. "I am here, I am here, I am here." Ezra watched, his own throat tight. He'd seen men cry after months in the wilderness, had seen women weep over graves, but this girl's tears were different. They were the tears of someone discovering they had a voice, even if it came through wood and wire and ivory. "That's it," he said softly. "That's the beginning." Lily came back the next day, and the next, and the one after that. Ezra didn't ask questions. Mountain men learned early that some stories revealed themselves in time or not at all. He simply made space for her in his shop, showed her how to sit, how to curve her fingers, how to read the simple notation he sketched out. She was a natural. Her fingers found the keys with an intuition that took most students years to develop. Within 2 weeks, she could play simple scales. Within a month, she was working through basic melodies, Green Sleeves, Barbara Allen, hymns she'd heard in church, but never sung. The music unlocked something in her, not her voice that remained stubbornly silent, but something deeper, a capacity for joy she'd thought dead. When she played, her face transformed. The usual dull resignation gave way to intense concentration, to pleasure, to sorrow, to anger, every emotion she couldn't speak, finding expression through her fingertips. Ezra found himself looking forward to her visits. The shop felt less like a mausoleum for his dead marriage and more like what Catherine would have wanted, a place where music lived and breathed and healed. But Harrisville was a small town, and small towns thrived on gossip. Martha heard about Lily's visits from Mrs. Brennan at the general store, who'd heard it from her husband, who'd seen that fat, mute girl going into the repair shop every morning. Martha's face had gone red as a turkey's wattle. She was waiting when Lily returned that evening, wooden spoon in hand, like a weapon. "Gadding about with that strange mountain man? Making a spectacle of yourself?" Lily shrank back, but Martha followed. "As if you're not enough of an embarrassment already. What could you possibly be doing there? You think learning piano will make you marriageable, make you useful?" She laughed, bitter and harsh. "No man wants a wife who can't even say, 'I do.'" The words hit their mark. Lily's face crumpled. "You're forbidden from going back. Waste of time, waste of hope. Tomorrow you start helping Mrs. Chen with laundry. At least that's honest work you can manage without talking." That night, Lily lay in her narrow bed and felt the silence pressed down like a burial shroud. The brief weeks of music had shown her what living felt like, and now it was being taken away. She pressed her fist against her mouth to muffle the sounds of her crying, not because she feared waking Martha, but because giving voice to her grief felt like admitting defeat. Days passed. Lily did not return to Ezra's shop. She bent over steaming laundry tubs at Mrs. Chen's, her hands raw and red, her spirit dimmer than it had been even before she discovered music. Mrs. Chen was kind but practical. She needed workers, not companions. The work was hard, mindless, exactly the kind of labor that let Lily's thoughts spiral into dark places. At night, she stared out her window at the stars and remembered how the piano keys felt under her fingers, how that first note had sounded, how Ezra had looked at her like she was capable of something beyond carrying laundry and being invisible. Ezra noticed her absence immediately. The shop felt hollow again. He'd grown accustomed to the sound of her practicing, to her eager face when she mastered a new piece. After a week, he closed up early and walked to Martha's cabin. Martha answered his knock with suspicion. "Mr. Dalton, what brings you here?" "Your niece. She hasn't been to lessons." "Lessons?" Martha snorted. "I put an end to that foolishness. Girl needs to learn her place, not fill her head with nonsense." Ezra's jaw tightened. He'd faced down grizzlies and hostile tribes, had survived blizzards that killed stronger men, but the casual cruelty of civilized people still had the power to surprise him. That girl has talent, real talent. Music could give her a future, a purpose. "Her purpose is to not be a burden," Martha snapped. "And music won't change the fact that she's fat, mute, and unmarriageable. The kindest thing is to teach her to survive, not to dream." "The kindest thing," Ezra said slowly, "would be to let her be more than what you've decided she is." Martha's face hardened. "Good evening, Mr. Dalton." She shut the door in his face. Ezra stood on the porch, frustration burning in his chest. Then an idea occurred to him. If Lily couldn't come to the piano, perhaps music could come to her. 2 days later, Ezra returned to Martha's cabin with a small wooden box. Martha eyed it suspiciously. "What's that?" "A gift. For Lily." He opened the box to reveal a harmonica, small and simple, its metal plates gleaming dully in the afternoon light. "It's quiet. She can play it without disturbing anyone. Music helps some people in ways talking to preachers can't." Martha's lips pressed together. She wanted to refuse, wanted to keep her niece from this man and his strange notions. But there was something in Ezra's weathered face that gave her pause, a sorrow that mirrored her own, though she'd never admit to sorrow. She'd lost her only sister in that fire, too. Maybe she'd been cruel to Lily, because seeing the girl was like looking at a living, breathing reminder of that loss. "Fine," she said curtly, "but if she wakes me with it, I'm throwing it in the creek." Ezra handed her the box. "Tell her it's a gift from someone who believes in her." That evening, Martha set the box on Lily's bed without explanation and left. Lily opened it with trembling hands and found the harmonica nestled in velvet, along with a note in Ezra's rough handwriting. "Music is patient. It will wait for you. E.D." Lily held the harmonica to her lips and blew gently. A pure, clear note emerged, wavering with her breath. She tried another hole, then another, finding the scale. Her eyes filled with tears, gratitude and grief and longing, all mixed together. Every night after that she played under her blanket, the sound muffled but still audible. Simple melodies at first, then more complex songs as her skill grew. She played the hymns from church, the folk songs she'd heard at harvest festivals, and eventually her own compositions, wordless stories of fire and loss, and the stubborn hope that refused to die completely. The neighbors heard. Windows cracked open. People paused on their way home from the tavern. Children stopped their playing to listen. The music was haunting, filled with a melancholy that seemed to reach into the chest and squeeze the heart. Mrs. Brennan, the general store owner's wife, was the first to comment. "That's Lily playing, isn't it? Martha's niece?" Her husband nodded. "Sounds like crying without tears." But nobody complained. Instead, they found themselves drawn to it. The harmonica's wail became part of Harrisville's evening soundtrack, as familiar as the church bell or the smith's hammer. Eleanor Webster, a widow who'd lost her husband to a logging accident the previous winter, stood outside Martha's cabin one evening, listening. The harmonica played a slow, mournful tune that captured everything Eleanor felt, but couldn't express the loneliness, the anger at God, the fear of facing life alone. When the music stopped, Eleanor knocked on the door. Martha answered, irritated. "Yes?" "I want to thank your niece," Eleanor said quietly. "Her music, it helped me tonight, helped me feel less alone." Martha stared at her, uncomprehending. "It's just noise." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "It's grief made beautiful. Please tell her I'm grateful." She wasn't the only one. Over the following weeks, others came. Thomas Green, who'd lost his son to fever. Sarah Mitchell, whose daughter had run off with a traveling merchant. People who carried their own silent wounds found solace in Lily's wordless songs. Ezra heard about it from a customer. "That student of yours, the mute girl, she's become quite the talk of town. People say her music heals something in them." An idea formed in Ezra's mind. Harrisville's annual Harvest Festival was in 3 weeks. There would be music, dancing, food. It was the social event of the season. What if Lily performed? Not the harmonica, which was intimate and private, but the piano, a full public declaration that she existed, that she mattered, that she had something to say, even without words. He broached the idea with Reverend Phillips, who organized the festival. The Reverend was a practical man who believed in God and good works in roughly equal measure. A mute girl playing piano? Ezra, I don't know. What if people mock her? "They won't," Ezra said with more confidence than he felt. They've been listening to her harmonica every night. They're ready to hear more. And her aunt? I'll handle Martha. That was easier said than done. When Ezra proposed the idea to Martha, she exploded. Absolutely not. You want to parade her in front of the whole town? She'll be humiliated. They'll laugh at her. They already listen to her, Ezra pointed out. Every night. They come to your door to thank her. This is a chance for Lily to be seen as more than her affliction. Or it's a chance for her to fail publicly and confirm everyone's worst assumptions, Martha shot back. But there was uncertainty in her voice now. She'd noticed the visitors, too, had heard their genuine gratitude. It confused her. She'd spent years believing Lily was worthless, and now people were saying otherwise. Ezra pressed his advantage. What if this is the thing that gives her value in this town's eyes? What if music is her way forward? Martha looked at him for a long moment. Finally she said, Ask her yourself. If she wants to do it, I won't stop her. But if she refuses, you leave her be. Understood? Ezra found Lily at the laundry, her dress soaked with water and sweat. When she saw him, her face transformed, the dull resignation replaced with genuine joy. He gestured for her to step outside. In simple words, he explained the festival, the opportunity, the risk. He didn't sugarcoat it. Some people will be cruel, they always are, but others will see you for what you are, a musician, someone with a gift, and maybe that's worth the risk. Lily's hands moved in the sign language Ezra had been teaching her along with music. I'm afraid. Fear's just proof you're alive, Ezra said. The question is, what kind of alive do you want to be? Lily thought about her nights under the blanket with the harmonica, about the way music made her feel human again, about Eleanor Webster's grateful face. She thought about spending the rest of her life invisible, silent, less than. She nodded. Yes, the 3 weeks before the festival were the most intense of Lily's life. Ezra drove her relentlessly, not with cruelty, but with the focused intensity of someone who knew this performance could change everything or destroy what fragile confidence she'd built. They worked on a piece Ezra had composed himself years ago, a melody that told the story of his wife's death and his flight into the mountains. It was achingly beautiful, full of loss and longing, and the kind of raw emotion that made listeners uncomfortable because it was so honest. This piece needs no words, Ezra told Lily. It says everything that needs saying. And that's what you'll do, say everything you can't speak. Lily practiced until her fingers cramped, until Martha complained about her pecking at the table during meals as if it were a keyboard. The other laundry women noticed the change in her, the fierce determination that replaced her usual resignation. Mrs. Chen, shrewd and observant, pulled her aside one day. This performance, it means something to you. Lily nodded, her eyes bright. Then you'll do well, Mrs. Chen said simply. I've seen many things in my years, and I've learned that people who have something to prove are often the most dangerous and most beautiful. You are both. The night of the festival arrived with unseasonable warmth. The town square had been decorated with lanterns and bunting, tables laden with food, a makeshift stage erected in front of the church. The piano, Ezra's piano, Catherine's piano, sat center stage, looking both majestic and vulnerable in the flickering light. Lily arrived with Martha, who'd insisted on braiding her niece's hair and lending her a decent dress. You'll represent this family properly, Martha had said, but her hands had been gentle as she worked, and Lily thought maybe there was a grudging pride beneath the stern words. The square filled with people. Lily stood backstage, really just behind a canvas sheet, and tried not to vomit from sheer terror. Her hands shook. Sweat rolled down her back. She could hear the crowd's chatter, could pick out individual voices. There the Yancey boys, already laughing about something, and Mrs. Brennan shushing her children, and Eleanor Webster's voice clear and encouraging. "I can't wait to hear her." Ezra appeared beside her. "You don't have to do this. We can leave right now and no one would blame you." But Lily shook her head firmly. She'd spent 9 years silent and invisible. Tonight she would be heard. Reverend Phillips took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special performance tonight. Miss Lily Hutchins will play an original composition by Mr. Ezra Dalton. Some of you have heard Miss Hutchins play harmonica in the evenings. Tonight, she shares her gift more fully with us all." There was polite applause, some curious murmurs. Lily walked onto the stage, and the murmuring grew louder. She could feel their eyes on her, cataloging her size, her awkward gait, the way her hands clenched into fists. The Yancey boys snickered audibly, but then she sat at the piano. Her hands touched the keys, and everything else fell away. The first notes were soft, hesitant a question asked in the darkness. Then the melody grew, building in complexity and emotion. It spoke of fire and loss, of screaming and silence, of years spent invisible and aching. It asked, "Do you see me now? Do you hear me?" The crowd fell silent. The Yancey boys' smirks faded. People who'd come for entertainment found themselves confronting something uncomfortable and necessary, the naked soul of another human being, displayed through music. Lily's fingers flew over the keys. She was no longer the fat, mute girl. She was the fire that had consumed her parents. She was the silence that followed. She was the harmonica's wail in the darkness. She was every person who'd ever lost something and had no words for the grief. Tears ran down her face, but she didn't stop. The music swelled to a crescendo that made people gasp, then softened into something tender and hopeful, a suggestion that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible, even for the most broken things. The final note hung in the air like a benediction, then silence terrible, suffocating silence. Lily's heart plummeted. She'd failed. They hated it. Then someone stood. It was Thomas Green, the farmer who'd lost his son. His face was wet with tears. "That," he said in a choked voice, "was the truest thing I've ever heard." The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. People stood, wiping their eyes, calling out encouragement. Eleanor Webster pushed her way to the stage and took Lily's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. But not everyone was moved. The Yancey boys stood in the back, their faces twisted with spite. "It's just noise," one shouted. "She can't even talk. How's music going to change that?" Before anyone could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "It changes everything." A stranger stepped forward, a man in his 40s, with the bearing of someone educated beyond this rough frontier town. "My name is Dr. Marcus Whitfield. I'm the new physician in town, and I believe I can help Miss Hutchins." Dr. Whitfield had arrived in Harrisville 2 weeks prior, fleeing a scandal in Boston that he refused to discuss. He'd treated a few minor ailments, colic in children, a broken leg from a logging accident, but had mostly kept to himself. Until tonight. "May I speak with you, Miss Hutchins?" he asked. Lily looked to Ezra, who nodded encouragingly. They met the next day in Ezra's shop. with Martha present as chaperone. Dr. Whitfield was direct. "I don't believe you're physically mute. You're crying tonight. Those sounds came from your vocal cords. I believe you're suffering from what we call psychogenic mutism. Your voice exists, but trauma has locked it away." Lily's eyes widened. Martha leaned forward. "Can you fix it?" "Perhaps, with time and the right treatment. But it won't be easy, and there's no guarantee." He looked at Lily. "The question is, do you want to try?" Lily's hands trembled as she signed, "Yes, please." The treatment began slowly. Dr. Whitfield was a proponent of new psychological methods from European clinics. The idea that talking about trauma could lessen its power. But Lily couldn't talk, so they adapted. "Music is your language," Whitfield said, "so we'll use it. I want you to play pieces that represent different emotions: anger, fear, joy. And as you play, I want you to try to make sounds, any sounds that match the emotion." The first sessions were frustrating. Lily would play angry, crashing chords, but when she tried to vocalize, nothing emerged. Ezra sat with her through it all, patient as stone. "Don't force it," he counseled. "Music taught me that the most powerful moments come when you stop trying to control everything." Weeks passed. Lily played and played, exhausting herself. Dr. Whitfield adjusted his approach, sometimes having her hum along to scales, other times working with her to form sounds without worrying about words. Then, one morning in November, something shifted. Lily was playing a simple melody, almost meditative in its calmness. Without thinking, she hummed along a low, vibrating sound that came from deep in her chest. She stopped, shocked. Ezra, who'd been repairing a violin in the corner, dropped his tool. "Do that again." She tried. Nothing. Tried again. A faint hum emerged, then faded. But it was something. It was the first intentional sound she'd made in 9 years. Dr. Whitfield was ecstatic when Ezra told him, "This is the breakthrough. Her voice is remembering how to work. Now we build on it." The process was agonizingly slow. From humming, they moved to single sustained notes. From notes to simple vowel sounds. Each step forward was met with setbacks, days when Lily's voice refused to work, when frustration made her cry, when the old silence seemed insurmountable. But Ezra never wavered. He'd survived 30 winters in the mountains by learning patience, by understanding that some things couldn't be rushed. "Healing isn't linear," he told Lily. "Sometimes you go backward to go forward." Martha watched her niece's transformation with mixed emotions. Part of her was proud, genuinely proud of Lily's determination. But another part resented how wrong she'd been, how much time she'd wasted treating the girl like garbage when she'd been capable of this all along. One evening, Martha came to Ezra's shop. "I need to say something to Lily," she announced. Lily looked up from the piano, wary. Martha had never visited the shop before. "I was wrong," Martha said stiffly, "about you, about the music. I thought I was protecting you by teaching you to expect nothing, but I was just seeing your mother in you, and it hurt too much to let myself hope you'd be more than she was, that you'd survive what she didn't." It was the closest thing to an apology Lily had ever received from her aunt. She stood and hugged Martha, awkward, unpracticed, but genuine. Martha stiffened, then softened, her arms coming up to return the embrace. "Don't make me cry, girl," Martha muttered. "I've got a reputation to maintain." By December, Lily could speak simple words. They came out hoarse and unpracticed, like a rusted machine learning to move again. Thank was her first word directed at Ezra after a particularly good lesson. You came next. Thank you became her mantra, her declaration, her proof that she existed as a full human being. Dr. Whitfield pushed for more. Try speaking a full sentence about anything. Lily thought carefully. What was worth breaking 9 years of silence for? She looked at Ezra, at this man who'd seen value in her when no one else had, who'd been patient when patience seemed impossible. She began, her voice cracking, I want to help others, like me. The words were halting, painful to produce, but they were hers. Ezra's eyes filled with tears. Then we'll make that happen. The idea came together slowly. A school, not just for music, but for people, especially children, who'd experienced trauma and needed a different way to communicate, to heal, to exist in the world. They started small. Ezra cleared space in his shop for a second piano, donated by a traveling merchant whose daughter Lily's festival performance had moved. Lily worked with Dr. Whitfield to develop methods combining music and basic psychological care. Their first student was 7-year-old Timothy Walsh, who'd stopped speaking after watching his older brother drown. The Walshes were desperate. Timothy had been examined by doctors, prayed over by preachers, even taken to a traveling healer who'd claimed to cast out demons. Nothing worked. Try music, Lily said in her halting voice. Try letting him speak without words first. Timothy took to the harmonica immediately. Within weeks, he was playing simple tunes. Within months, he spoke his first word, home. Word spread. More children came, some with physical disabilities, some with psychological wounds, some simply too shy or anxious to thrive in traditional schooling. Lily and Ezra taught them all, asking only that families contribute what they could afford. The school became Lily's purpose, her redemption, her answer to the question she'd asked the universe 9 years ago. Why did I survive when they didn't? But running a school required resources they didn't have. Martha, in a stunning reversal, began organizing fundraisers. If my niece can learn to speak again, we can certainly convince these tight-fisted townsfolk to part with some money, she declared. The Harvest Festival of 1825 featured another performance by Lily, but this time she wasn't alone. Her students performed with her, a small ensemble of harmed children making beautiful noise together. The town wept. Donations poured in. Ezra watched from the side of the stage, his heart full of something he hadn't felt since Catherine died. Hope. Not hope that the past could be changed. He was too old and wise for that, but hope that the future could be different. Better. After the performance, he found Lily backstage, surrounded by well-wishers. She looked exhausted, but radiant, more alive than he'd ever seen her. You did well, he said simply. She smiled the real smile she reserved for rare moments of pure joy. Thank you for everything. I didn't do anything. You did the work. No, she said firmly, her voice stronger now. You gave me permission to try, to fail, to be more than people expected. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended words. They'd both been broken by loss. They'd both found healing in music. And they'd both discovered that the greatest gift you can give another person is the belief that they're worthy of being seen. The winter of 1826 was brutal, but the school thrived. Lily had 12 students now, ranging from age 5 to 16. She still struggled with speech. It came easier on good days, harder when she was tired or stressed, but she'd learned to use music to supplement words. Sometimes she'd hum a melody to answer a question. Her students understood perfectly. Ezra found himself watching her more often, not as a teacher watches a student, but as a man watches a woman. When had that changed? He was 39 years older than her, weathered by life in ways she couldn't imagine. It seemed absurd, even predatory, for him to entertain such thoughts. But the heart knows no logic. He'd see her laughing with a student, or hear her practicing late at night, or watch her explain a concept with patient hand gestures, and something in him would stir a longing he'd thought dead with Catherine. Lily felt it too, though she didn't have the experience to name it. All she knew was that Ezra's presence made her feel safe in a way nothing else did. When he was near, the old terror of the fire receded. When he smiled at her, she felt beautiful despite every message she'd received to the contrary. It was Eleanor Webster who finally said something. She'd become a friend to Lily, visiting the school often to help with younger children. One day, watching Lily stare after Ezra as he left to purchase supplies, Eleanor chuckled. "You love him," she said matter-of-factly. Lily's face flamed red. No, he's too old, too gruff, too scarred by life?" Eleanor smiled kindly. "Love doesn't care about those things, and anyone with eyes can see he feels the same." "But I'm not—" Lily gestured helplessly at herself, at her size, her struggling speech, her damaged past. "You're exactly who you need to be," Eleanor said firmly, "and if that man doesn't see your worth, he's a fool." But Ezra did see her worth. That was the problem. He saw it so clearly it terrified him. He'd failed Catherine by not being there when cholera struck. He'd run from civilization rather than face his grief. What right did he have to another chance at happiness? The tension built through the spring. They'd brush hands reaching for the same music sheet. Their eyes would meet across the piano and linger too long. Students began giggling when they were in the same room. Finally, in May, Ezra couldn't bear it anymore. He found Lily after class one evening, working on a new composition. "Can we talk?" She nodded, nervous. Had she done something wrong? He sat beside her on the piano bench, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I need to say something, and I need you to listen without responding until I'm done. Can you do that?" Another nod. "I'm an old man," Ezra began. "Too old for you by any measure. I've got more past than future, more scars than sense. I ran from love once because I couldn't handle losing it, and I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again." He paused, gathering courage. "But then you walked into my shop, and you reminded me that living means risking pain, that music only matters because silence exists, that love is worth the fear." Lily's breath caught. "I don't have the right to ask this. You deserve someone young, someone whole, someone who can give you a full life. But I can't help how I feel. I love you, Lily Hutchins. I love your courage and your music and the way you refuse to let the world make you small. And if you'll have me broken, aging, foolish old mountain man that I am, I'd be honored to spend whatever time I have left by your side." Silence. Then Lily did something she'd never done before. She spoke a full, complex sentence without hesitation or struggle. "Ezra Dalton, I have loved you since the day you let me touch that piano." His eyes widened. She smiled through sudden tears. "You gave me back my life. How could I not love you?" They married in June, a small ceremony in the school they'd built together. Lily wore a simple blue dress. Ezra wore his cleanest shirt. Instead of traditional vows, they played a duet piano and fiddle in harmony, saying everything that needed to be said. Martha cried, to everyone's surprise. "I never thought I'd see her happy," she whispered to Eleanor. "Never thought she'd be anything but alone." "That makes two of them," Eleanor replied, watching Ezra's face as he looked at his new wife. They saved each other. By 1827, the school needed a proper building. The shop was too small for 20 students. The number had doubled again as word spread throughout Tennessee and beyond. People brought children from as far as Kentucky and Virginia, desperate for help their local doctors and preachers couldn't provide. The town rallied, lumber was donated, labor volunteered, and by autumn, a new building stood at the edge of Harrisville, 2 stories, with 4 classrooms, a large performance hall, and living quarters for Lily and Ezra. They named it the Catherine Dalton School of Music and Healing, honoring the woman whose piano had started it all. Ezra broke down when they unveiled the sign. "She'd have loved this," he managed through tears. "She always believed music could heal." Lily took his hand. Her speech had improved dramatically with use, though she still preferred music for expressing complex emotions. "She lives on, in every child we teach." The curriculum expanded beyond music. Dr. Whitfield, now permanent physician to the school, taught basic medical care. Martha, shockingly, began teaching homemaking skills with unusual gentleness. Eleanor taught reading and writing. The school became a holistic refuge for damaged children. But success brought new challenges. The Yancey family, still bitter about their sons being shown up by a mute fat girl, began spreading rumors. "That school is teaching children witchcraft," Mrs. Yancey told anyone who'd listen, "making evil noises to summon demons." Most people ignored her, but some listened. Vandalism started, broken windows, paint thrown on the building, threatening notes nailed to the door. One night, someone tried to set fire to the school's small barn. Ezra caught them 2 of the Yancey boys drunk and carrying torches. The sight of fire sent Lily into a panic attack that lasted hours, her breathing shallow, her eyes seeing not the barn, but her parents' cabin. "This has to stop," Ezra told Reverend Phillips the next day. "We're trying to help children, and they're trying to burn us out." The Reverend organized a town meeting. Nearly everyone came, curious or concerned or looking for entertainment. Mrs. Yancey stood to speak first, her face twisted with righteous anger. "This school is an abomination, teaching children to make noise instead of honest work." "They're learning to heal," Eleanor interrupted, standing. "My son Thomas learned piano at that school. He hasn't had nightmares about his father's death in 6 months. That's not witchcraft, that's mercy." Others stood, parents whose children had been transformed, teachers who'd seen miracles. Thomas Green brought his young daughter, who'd stopped eating after her mother's death. "Miss Lily taught her to sing," he said simply, "and singing led to eating. Music saved my child's life." The tide turned. Even some who'd been sympathetic to the Yanceys couldn't argue with results. The Reverend stood. "This school stays, and anyone who threatens it threatens this community's children. That includes you, Yanceys." Mrs. Yancey left in a fury, but the vandalism stopped. The school was safe. In the spring of 1828, a letter arrived from Nashville. It was addressed to Lily, written in elegant script. Dear Mrs. Dalton, I am Margaret Foster, Director of the Nashville Institute for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I have heard remarkable things about your school and your methods. Would you consider sharing your techniques with our teachers? We have many students who might benefit from music therapy. Also, I would be honored to invite you to perform at our annual benefit concert in June. Your story is one that needs to be heard across Tennessee and beyond. Lily read the letter 3 times, hardly believing it. Nashville was a real city, with theaters and universities and culture, and they wanted her? Of course you should go, Ezra said. This is your chance to reach more people. But I'm still... She struggled for words. Still what? Still the scared girl who walked into my shop? No. You're Lily Dalton, teacher and musician, and you have something important to offer. They traveled to Nashville in May Lily's first time away from Harrisville since she'd arrived as a traumatized 12-year-old. The city overwhelmed her at first with its noise and crowds and endless motion. But the Institute was an oasis of quiet purpose. Margaret Foster was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd lost her hearing to scarlet fever as a child and had spent her life advocating for deaf education. Your methods intrigue me, she told Lily through an interpreter who signed. Music as therapy for trauma is relatively new, but the results speak for themselves. Lily spent 2 weeks teaching at the Institute. She worked with deaf children, showing them how to feel music through vibration, how rhythm could provide structure for chaotic emotions. She worked with hearing children who'd experienced trauma, using her own story as proof that healing was possible. The benefit concert arrived. Lily stood backstage in a borrowed dress, more nervous than she'd been at her first Harrisville performance. This audience was sophisticated, educated, used to professional musicians. What if they found her lacking? Ezra squeezed her hand. Play for yourself, for that 12-year-old girl who lost everything, for every child you've taught. The audience is secondary. She walked onto the stage of the Grand Nashville Theater. 200 people filled the seats, their faces expectant. Margaret Foster introduced her. Lily Dalton lost her voice to trauma at age 12. She found it again through music. Tonight, she'll demonstrate how music transcends words, how it gives voice to the voiceless. Lily sat at the grand piano far finer than anything in Harrisville. She played the piece from her first performance, but it had evolved. It was longer now, more complex, with movements representing not just loss, but recovery, pain and healing, silence and sound. The audience was transfixed. When she finished, the applause lasted 5 minutes. People stood, calling for an encore. Margaret Foster had tears running down her face. Afterward, a woman approached Lily. She was young, well-dressed, clearly from money. "My name is Catherine Brewster," she said. "My mother was Catherine Dalton, Ezra's first wife." Lily's breath caught. Ezra had mentioned his wife had family in Nashville, but he'd lost touch after her death. Catherine Brewster smiled sadly. "I heard about your school, about its name. I wanted to thank you. Mother loved music more than anything. She'd be so proud that her piano is still teaching, still healing." "Your mother," Lily began, then paused. "Your mother gave me my life back, through Ezra, through her piano." "Then we're family," Catherine said simply, "and family helps family. I'd like to endow your school, provide funding for expansion, scholarships for students who can't pay, salaries for teachers. Mother's trust left me considerable means. I can think of no better use than supporting the work she would have done herself." Lily couldn't speak, tears overwhelming her, but she didn't need words. The gratitude showed in every line of her face. The endowment transformed the school. By 1830, the Catherine Dalton School had 40 students, 6 full-time teachers, and a reputation that reached across the South. Children came from as far as Georgia and North Carolina. Some stayed for months, others for years. All left changed. Lily's speech had improved to the point where most people didn't notice her occasional hesitations. She still preferred music for deep communication, but she could teach effectively, advocate for her students, and even give speeches when necessary, though those still made her nervous. She and Ezra had settled into comfortable partnership. They worked side by side every day, teaching music and healing. Evenings were spent in their quarters above the school, reading or playing duets or simply sitting in companionable silence. They hadn't had children. Lily's difficult childhood had left her body less than ideal for pregnancy, and Ezra was in his 60s now. But they had dozens of children, the students who looked to them as parents, protectors, champions. One autumn evening, Lily walked to the cemetery at the edge of town. She did this once a year, on the anniversary of the fire. She stood before the simple marker reading James and Sarah Hutchins, and spoke aloud something she'd never been able to do before. "I survived," she said simply. "I don't know why, don't know if there's a reason or if it's just chance. But I've tried to make it mean something. I've tried to help others who hurt like I hurt." She paused. "I hope that's enough. I hope you'd be proud." The wind rustled the leaves, no answer, but somehow enough. She returned to find Ezra on the school's porch, watching the sunset. He was aging visibly now, moving slower, tiring easier, but his eyes still sparkled when he looked at her. "I was thinking," he said as she sat beside him, "about that first day you walked into my shop. You looked at that piano like it was magic." "It was magic," Lily replied. "It gave me back my voice." "No," Ezra said gently. "Your voice was always there. The piano just helped you remember how to use it." They sat in silence, watching students practice through the open windows. The sounds of scales and simple melodies drifted out, each note a small victory, each song a prayer for healing. Lily thought about the journey from that burned cabin to this moment, from silence to sound, from invisible to seen, from worthless to worthy. The path had been brutal, marked by pain and prejudice and despair, but also by kindness from a gruff mountain man who saw potential in a mute fat girl, from a doctor who offered hope, from an aunt who learned to love better, from a community that chose compassion. "Thank you," she said to Ezra. The words were simple, but they contained 9 years of gratitude, love, and wonder at the strange grace of second chances. He took her hand. "No, Lily, thank you. You taught me that it's never too late to start over, that broken things can be beautiful, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is simply believing in someone until they learn to believe in themselves." As darkness fell, the school's lights blazed warm and welcoming. Inside, children who'd known only pain were learning that joy was possible. That trauma didn't have to be the end of the story. That music-patient, persistent, powerful music could speak when words failed. And in that small Tennessee town, 2 broken people who'd found each other had built something larger than themselves. Proof that love and art and stubborn hope could transform even the darkest silence into song. Years later, Long after Ezra had passed peacefully in his sleep at 70, long after Lily had become a grandmother figure to hundreds of healed children, she would still play piano every evening. Her students, now grown, would sometimes return to listen. And in those melodies, some joyful, some sad, all honest, they heard the same message that had saved a mute girl in 1824. You are not alone. You are not voiceless. You are not beyond healing. The music says so.